Wampeters Foma Granfalloons. I picked this up not too long ago. It's kind of an interesting Vonnegut book. Now, I've read Vonnegut in the past, and I've read this book in the past, actually. My first wife had picked it up somewhere or another, and then I found a copy in one of the little free libraries. I didn't remember really liking it, but I'm like, well, let's go with it. And I read it this time, and I enjoyed it a lot more. The thing is, so Vonnegut is weird to me. And I always put an R in there. It's not in there. I find him a clever writer, but I'm not sure that he's all, like, I don't find his storytelling particularly exciting. And now this is a book mainly of his essays, some speeches, just crap collected up all over the place. There is one piece of fiction in it, which is a screenplay that never got performed, essentially, which is kind of clever. It has a neat little twist at the end, and it's one that I mostly remembered, the twist, etc. So it didn't have the effect that it should. So this covers a lot of kind of odd things. Most of the work in it was actually put together, I think, either in or near. Well, no, he's got a copyright. No, this is the copyrights of all the pieces in it. This edition was from 1989. There may have been an earlier hardbound one or whatever. Yeah, they say one previous Dell edition, which was probably like the year before or whatever. So, yeah, it was about 1990. But all of the essays are from like between 65 and 74. You know, so this is old work that hadn't been compiled before. I don't know if Vonnegut was still writing at the time that this came out. I know that he was still doing stuff, like he would show up on interviews and things like that, but I can't recall anything after about the Cat's Cradle era. And most of his fiction has usually just kind of buzzed over me. It wasn't science fiction-y enough. And he actually goes into this in at least one of his essays, that he's not really sure he's a science fiction author, but he kind of is, and I kind of agree. It never felt like he really reveled in that science fiction-y type of writing. However, like I said, sometimes he can be very clever in the way he phrases things and whatnot. But other times, I find that he just kind of annoys me, to be honest. And I'm trying to think how he does it. Sometimes it's with a repetition. I'm trying to remember which one it is. But he's got one where he just, takes a couple words out of each paragraph. He writes a paragraph describing a situation, then he takes a couple of words that he thinks kind of exemplify it, and repeats those words again and again. And yeah, this is the one it is, isn't it? Yeah, I think it is. Maybe he does this multiple times, where he's just fitting like a word or two out of the paragraph, pulling it out. And I found that kind of, I don't know what, It started to get annoying after a while. He mixes it up. Sometimes he puts things that aren't from the paragraphs, just a couple of words that, are sort of the same kind of echoing feeling, but not the same words. And, I mean, there's a certain exploration of the literary landscape and whatnot that he's doing, and you can't really fault him for that. In other ways, though, he reminds me of the kind of cleverness of turns of phrases that, Zelazny uses. Different, but similarly clever. And then sometimes there's just playful stuff, like plays on words and whatnot. My most memorable is, I'm going to take a leak. Where I come from, one person says, and the other person says, where I come from, that means you're going to steal a mirror. Because at some earlier point, mirrors were described as leaks, and he's just linking these things together, and, it's just kind of a little funny callback going to it. Again, I don't know that I particularly enjoy that, but it's okay. But what I found really interesting in this, at this point in time, was looking back at those essays from, really the Vietnam War era. They're all coming in from there. And, I mean, there's like one where he's talking about traveling on the Kennedy's boat, and at least Robert is still alive when he's on it. In fact, I think that's where it fits in between the two's death. And the nostalgia aspect of it is more interesting to me now. It wasn't that interesting to me back when I first read it, about when it came out, probably 94 or so, I'm guessing, just from the time period, maybe a little later. So anyway, this is one that I'm probably going to put back in the in the little free library system, mainly because I did remember most of it when I read it again, and I think I've gotten what I wanted out of it. But I did enjoy, and that's of some value. The reason I did this, I've been putting this off because I finished this during my power outage, actually. And, well, one reason I haven't done it is because putting the title of this down is going to be somewhat annoying to me. But I've also just not really been in the mood to be talking about the books. But I wanted to cover this just to give some thoughts on Vonnegut in general. And he goes into many times how much of a cynic he is. But he's an optimistic cynic, which in some ways, and I'm trying to recall some things, in some ways it reminds me of myself, where I've got like these, like my cynicism is born from unrealistic optimism. I don't know that his is, but there's sort of this, mocking cynicism, but at the same time, underneath it all, there may be a belief that things are actually all right beyond that all. And I did find a lot of his points both insightful and, in some ways, thoughts that I had in my own head. One of them was, and this is something written during the Vietnam War era, but about how we've become disconnected from one another to such a large extent. Well, he's noticing it back then. I was too young at that point to really realize that. But I did kind of feel like, looking back at history, now he's going back, to Stone Age and whatnot, but I've always kind of been looking back and saying, families and communities and everything were so much more important at one point. And nowadays, we're so much more detached than we were at the time that this was written. To the extent that, we're all on well, not me, but many of us, most of us are on our cell phones or, in my case, on my computer all the time, not really interacting with other people anywhere near to the degree that people did when I was growing up. The funny thing for me is I kind of feel like the rest of the world has caught up to me, even though I'm like, no adopter in terms of new technologies and whatnot. At least I've been very, very slow at adopting anything since the early 80s. I'm not sure why. I was very into computers before computers were really available to many people, and then since then I've always been kind of well behind the pack in terms of any technologies that have been coming out, for whatever reason. I'm not even sure why. But within that, I look at sort of the modern, these Gen Zers and whatever, and I'm like, there are certain things I don't get, like their musical tastes. But in a lot of ways, it feels almost like they're like catching up to me in a way that the last couple generations or whatever haven't really been doing. And now some of that may just be, my autism and whatever, and that society as a whole is becoming more and more autistic when it comes down to it, or more autistic friendly in a lot of ways, where, people aren't being forced to interact with one another and whatnot. Anyway, what I was trying to say and failed was I had coffee today, and that's kind of like late, very late, and that's kind of interfered with my plans to like try to read rules and prepare myself to do something during the time that I know I have right now. I have a couple of hours, and I'm too awake to just like nap or whatever, but also too wired to actually do anything. I feel like I did before I started smoking, to be honest. This is how I often was just unable to focus on anything and unable to stop my mind from just whirring and whirring and whirring. Not necessarily getting anywhere. The gears aren't catching. It's just spinning at a while. Anyway, we went places, as we always do whenever I'm talking, that I didn't necessarily mean to, but maybe we hit some of the things I meant to. And yeah, let's send it up for those of you who like these for whatever reason.